All right, so today we're going to go over genetics. That's what we're doing. So in the bell ringer, we're going to assess what you pre-know, okay? So you got your pencil right there. We're talking about Gregor Mendel and an introduction to genetics. So in the bell ringer, the first question is, there are three, right? Agree or disagree if you think that it's true or false. So parents' traits always blend in their offspring like mixing paint. Do you agree or disagree? And this is just according to what you believe right now. At the end of the lesson, we're going to go back and see if you agree with your answers or not. So you can write true or false. True or false. Parents' traits always blend in their offspring like mixing paint. Write it down.
Oh, Jesus. Let me think for a second.
Okay.
I guess I don't know.
Okay. All right, number 2. If you look more like your mother than you look like your father, then you received more traits from your mother. True or false?
I know that one, yeah.
And then number 3, all inherited traits follow Mendel's patterns of inheritance. True or false?
And they all can't be true for me. Well, I'll just do it. Fine.
Okay. All right, so down here, briefly, like give 1 or 2 sentences why you think you don't look like an elephant, you yourself.
Elephant, okay.
Right. Why
This is
don't you
cool.
think you look like an elephant? And then again, at the end of the lesson, we're going to come back and compare your notes from beginning to end.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So genetics and hereditary. Hereditary is the passing of traits from parents to offspring with your DNA, right? There's your DNA helix right there. And genetics is the study of how the traits are passed from parents to offspring, okay? So flipping these notes right here, these are what you're going to write on as we go through the lesson, okay? So you get to keep this for a quiz. These are your notes that you can use for quizzes, all right? So we're actually going to draw a diagram if you need to write on the back, but as you go through this section, these are the notes that you're going to choose to write on, any information you need, okay? So on the first slide that we have, Gregor Mendel is considered the father of genetics because he's the first person to track one trait from several generations. And in the late 1850s, how he studied this was he grew and studied pea plants. He's an Austrian monk and biologist, but his work was not recognized until the turn of the 20th century. So all the work that he was doing, it wasn't recognized until later, but he is still considered the father of genetics. So, what are traits? They're distinguishing characteristics. Examples include your eye color, nose, and hair color. All right, so your eye color is brown. My eye color is brown. Anybody have blue eyes? Okay. So she has a different trait than we do, okay? Our nose shapes are different. Our hair color is different. Mine is dyed. It's not what we got, okay? So how do people get traits from their parents? They are inherited. So on this paper, you each get an allele from your mom and your dad. So you're going to flip that paper over for me. And what you're going to do is draw like an X, but they don't intercept. Okay. So you're going to draw one allele here, just like this. This is one allele from your mom. And this is one allele from your dad.
Well, if I
Okay.
can draw that, I can draw.
All right. So they intercept. They're going to touch, all right, but they don't cross over. Yes, okay? Now, at the tips, you're going to color in just at the very ends, okay? And you're going to label those telomeres.
All the ends.
Telomeres. Okay, yep, all the ends, yes. And what these do is when your cells are going through meiosis and mitosis and they're splitting, the telomeres are like anchor weights and they make sure that your your chromatids don't split apart. Okay? Now the middle, where they intersect, that is called your centromere. So you're going to label it centromere. Okay? The middle is labeled centromere. And each of these legs from the alleles that you got from your parents, those are called your chromatids. Those are called your chromatids, right there. Make sure you point arrows to where they are, okay? Yep. Good. Now, on each of these alleles, on each of the chromosomes that you inherit, remember, you get one from your mom, okay? So that could be your mom allele, and this could be your dad allele, okay? You get one from each. On each specific spot, there is an X factor, a specific gene, okay, on each of them. And those are called your loci or your locus, okay? Either or. If you hear the term loci or locus, that is where a specific gene is marked on your chromatid. And that is what gives you your genotypes, okay? Whatever you're looking for. That is located on your loci locus. Okay? All right, so these are located within your DNA helix right here. And this is how you get your traits. So one comes from your mom, one comes from your dad. Okay? So based on what we just went over, what do you think? Which of the following statements is true about Mendel? Is he an American monk? Did he carry out research with Charles Darwin? Is he considered the father of genetics, or was he a zoologist? Mark which one you think. Good. Okay. So, moving on to the next slide. So when he studied genetics, he used the flowers, okay? So he had purple flowers and he had white flowers, and he crossbreeded them to see what the offspring would come out, okay? Purple flowers were considered dominant, all right, which is right here when we use the Punnett square. Dominant trait is when they have to be big, okay? They have to be homozygous and they have to be big when it's considered dominant. Actually, they can be heterozygous too, but we'll get to that in a second. So he came up with the purple flowers, and their genetic code was big P, big P. He discovered that the white flowers, their genotype was little p, okay? So when he crossbreeded the purple flowers with the white flowers, where did the white flowers go? Because at the end of it, they all came out purple or a variation of purple. Let's fill out this Punnett square to figure out why. So whenever you're filling out a Punnett square, the dominant trait is always filled out first, the dominant letter, okay? So it's just like a multiplication table. So what would go here in this square? You have, write it down. Let's write it down. Yep. You have, no. So genotypes, whenever you write them, you're going to write what you have for your letters. So it's going to be big P, little p in the first square, right?
Yeah.
What about the second square?
It'd be the same.
Write it down.
So big P.
Yep. And what about this square?
That'd be small p and then big P, wouldn't it?
Yep. And remember, when we're writing it, what always comes first?
The dominant.
Yes. So it's going to be written as
big P.
Yep.
Correct.
Exactly. Yes. And then the fourth square. So when you look at that, what is the trait that you're going to see?
The dominant.
They're all dominant. They all have a dominant trait in there, right? So what was the dominant trait up here?
Purple.
Purple. So where did all the white flowers go?
Into the purple flower. Like
Right, because they were all left with a dominant and a recessive trait, right? So that means all the flowers are going to be a mix of the dominant trait, which is purple. That's why there were no white flowers left over. Okay? So again, then he did different, so when you have a trait like this, okay, those are called hybrids. When you have a mix of a homozygous and a heterozygous, okay, when you have dominant and recessive, those are called hybrids. All right, so they are different forms of the same trait. So when he mixed dominant purple with recessive white, he came up with hybrids, okay? And hybrids are also known as heterozygous, okay? So if you flip over on your notes right here, you'll actually see, okay, the terms that we've already gone over. The alleles, the chromosomes, genes, chromatids, centromere, telomere, loci, okay? Dominant, recessive, homozygous, okay? So we're about to get into the homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive, okay? But here you see heterozygous or hybrids. All right. So the next slide, a dominant trait is a genetic factor that blocks another genetic factor. And a recessive trait is one that is blocked by the presence of a dominant factor. Okay. So let's say the dominant factor is brown eyes. Okay. We can either have a dominant homozygous, which is big B, or we can have a dominant heterozygous, which is a hybrid, right? Big B, little b, for her to have, or him to have brown eyes. Recessive would be blue eyes, okay? And in order to have her to have blue eyes, what would that have to be? If it's a recessive trait, yes, little b, because if she had a dominant trait, what would her eyes be?
Baby.
Right, and they would be what color?
Blue. Wait, you're talking about brown?
Yes, brown, okay? So in order for anybody to have a recessive trait, they have to be homozygous recessive, okay? They both have to be the same lower tape genetic, the genotype, okay? All right, so looking here, drag the lines to match the vocabulary words within its definition. Okay, so we're going to try to see what you remember, what we've already gone over, but remember, you also have this to look at too, okay, your notes. What is a trait? You've got trait, inherit, dominant, recessive, gene, and allele. So what is a genetic factor that blocks another genetic factor? We just went over that.
Yeah, true.
Is it trait, inherit, dominant, recessive, gene, or allele? A genetic factor that blocks. That is the key word right there. Another genetic
I wish I
factor.
remember these things. Jesus.
Yep, exactly. So draw a line from there to there. Good. What is a section of DNA that controls a trait?
Not the gene.
Okay.
Wait. Is it the gene?
If you don't know, we can always come back to it. Let's
It's
move
the
on
alley.
and see if.
Is it that one?
Let's move on and
Okay.
see. This is how you always do process of elimination. Always go to the ones you know and then come back to the ones that you don't know, okay? Even in tests and quizzes, that's the best way to do it, all right? What is a genetic factor that is blocked by the presence of a dominant factor? There you go. Okay. What is a distinguishing characteristic? Something that stands out. Distinguishing is just a fancy word for something that makes you stand out from other people. Okay? The Queen of England is very distinguished from me. If she walks in the room and I walk in the room, you're going to be able to see the distinguishment between the two of us.
Gene. I think. I just wrong.
Okay. All right, so represents the different factors of a gene. What represents the different factors of a gene?
Trait.
Okay. And what happens when you receive something from a parent genetically?
No inherit.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I forgot that's the.
Okay. So again, what is the section of DNA that controls a trait?
Gene.
Okay.
Gene. And then right there.
There you go. Okay. So what Mendel concluded was that two factors, one from your father, right? Nope, you're good. One from your father and one from your mother, okay, control your inherited traits. So we know those traits to be alleles, okay? The alleles represent the different factors of a gene, okay, which is a section of DNA that controls the trait. Okay, so now, homozygous or heterozygous. If the alleles are the same, they are considered homozygous. So right here on your notes, when we're talking about homozygous dominant,
Two capital.
okay, they are two capital letters. Are they the same?
Yeah.
So they are homozygous, and are they big B or little b?
Big B.
Big B, so they are considered
Dominant.
right? Okay, you can also have homozygous recessive, which is two small letters. Are they the same?
Yeah.
Right, so they're homozygous, and are they little? Which means they are recessive, okay?
That'd be dominant. Recessive. And that's.
All right, and then you have heterozygous, which is big B, little b, okay? So are they the same?
No.
No, so they are considered heterozygous, okay? You are going to constantly see those three terms as we fill out your Punnett squares here in a minute, okay? All right, so you got to know the difference between homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, and then the hybrids, which are the heterozygous, okay? All right? So, the basics.
Oh, Jesus.
A section of DNA that determines a trait is called what? Okay? Right here. Remember what we just read? Yep, the alleles, yes.
Alleles.
Mm-hmm. Okay. A different form of a gene, like brown or blue color, is called a what? So if we look at the notes, all right, and I want you to underline genotype, genetics, okay? Genotype, when you hear genotype, it is your genetic code, all right? GG, genetic, genotype, genetic, GG, okay? That means your genetic code are the letters, all right? They're going to be big B, big B, big B, little b, little b, etc. Or they could be C's, T's, S's. They could be any number of the alphabet, okay? Your phenotype, underline the PH in there. Phenotype is the physical description, okay? So phenotype is PH, physical is PH. Phenotype, physical. Say it with me. Phenotype, physical.
Phenotype. Physical.
Okay, and then genotype is genetics, okay? So whenever you're looking in the slides up ahead, they're going to ask for the probabilities, okay? And they'll ask for a probability of a phenotype, which will be what?
Physical.
Physical descriptions, such as what color's your hair?
Dark brown.
Yeah, brown, okay? So they'll ask, what is the phenotype between brown hair and blonde hair, okay? The phenotype is the physical description. If they ask for the genotype, it's asking you for the genetic code, the letters, okay? All right? So a different form of a gene like brown or blue eye color will be called a what? Phenotype, exactly, right there. Okay, good. And then an individual's blank is the actual genetic code for that gene. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Right there. Okay? So, an individual's genotype is the actual genetic makeup for that gene, while it's blank is a physical trait that can be observed. It's the same one that you put over here. Yeah,
wow.
it's the same. Yep.
What's that?
Okay. Having the same allele for a trait makes an individual what for the trait? If they have the same, which one? Homozygous or heterozygous is the same? Yes. It's homozygous. Yep. And then having two different alleles, yes, heterozygous, okay? Good. Is it clicking?
Sure.
Okay.
A little bit.
All right, so just to get some dexterity in with you, we're actually going to use scissors and glue. So you're going to cut out these genotypes. Remember, genotypes is a genetic code, okay? So cut out those genotypes. I've got scissors right there.
I'm gonna become a cat again, man.
Yep. Use the dexterity of your fingers.
I just cut the middle out of it.
Yep, just cut out the whole coat. Yeah, you're going to cut them out and then we're going to separate them. Because you're going to put the genotypes and match them up to the alleles in the pictures. Okay, good. Now, separate them so you can see them.
Oh, Jesus.
Yep. Because we got glue stick too. Okay. So, we have dominant traits right here and recessive traits right here. Okay? All right, so in order to have a dominant trait for tall, okay, what genotypes can you have? Okay, for tall, we're using the,
T,
yep, the big T, okay? So what can you have if you have a tall plant? Yes. So you have, what is big T called? It is called
homozygous.
homozygous. Yep, because it's the same, right?
Yeah.
And then is it dominant or recessive?
Dominant.
Dominant. So you're going to glue it right in here. Yep.
And I wish I used my brain like this before.
It's a lot easier when it's taught so you understand, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And can there be another genetic code looking at this? Because tall has to have a dominant trait. Is there another dominant? Yes. Now, what is that one called? Because it's got a big T and a little t. So what would that one be called? Heterozygous. It's a hybrid. A hybrid, right? Good. So there are two genotypes that you can actually have to get tall plants. Do you see that? You have homozygous dominant and heterozygous. And they both have the dominant T's in it, okay? Now, in order to get the short plant, it is a recessive trait, right? Which one is the only, yes, exactly. Why can that be the only one?
Because it's only little T's.
Right, okay? And if there is a dominant trait, it automatically cancels out the recessive trait, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Good.
Yeah, I'm smart, I guess.
Yes, you are smart. Okay, so this one is what flower?
I don't. White.
Right, it's the white flower. Okay, what is the white?
P.
But is it dominant or recessive P?
Recessive.
Recessive. Okay, so what is the only genotype that it can have?
Small P.
Right. Okay,
Is it two small P's?
you tell me. If it has to be a recessive, and the only way you can get recessive.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. It has to be homozygous
This one.
recessive. Yes. Okay. You cannot have a dominant trait.
Okay, that's just nice.
All right. And then the last one is your
Giant P.
purple flower. And is the purple dominant or recessive?
Dominant.
Dominant. So what are the two genotypes that it could possibly have?
Homozygous.
Homozygous what?
I'm dominant.
Yep. Homozygous dominant, which is big P,
And this one.
which is called
Genotype. Wait, no. Heterozygous.
Yep, heterozygous, which means it is a hybrid. It has a dominant and a recessive trait in it, an allele, a dominant and a recessive allele in it.
That's just
Okay. Is it starting to click a little bit?
yeah.
Okay, we're about to find out, okay?
Oh goodness.
So now, all right, going back to our notes, okay? You have your notes to help you
I
out
forgot
with
about
this, okay? You have the alleles of big B equals brown eyes dominant, and little b, okay, recessive trait is blue eyes. In a Punnett square, the top of the Punnett square and the side of the Punnett square, on the outside are always the parents,
Yeah.
okay?
That's dominant.
Remember when you're writing the traits, the genotypes, the dominant trait always goes first, okay? So if you have big B, what is the phenotype of that genotype?
Dominant. So that'd be.
Okay, phenotype. Remember, what did we learn? Phenotype means
The physical description.
physical description. So this is the genotype, the letters, right? The genetic code, big B. What is the phenotype of that then? What is it telling us here?
Physical description.
Which is what?
Brown eyes.
Brown eyes, okay? The physical description is your brown eyes. When you have little b, what is the genotype of this first? It's recessive and is it homozygous or heterozygous?
Heterozygous. Yeah, heterozygous. What? Hold up.
Heterozygous means mixed, right? It's a hybrid. So is little b heterozygous or homozygous? Homozygous. Homozygous means
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
the same, okay? The same. All right?
I was looking at that one, not that one.
So this is a homozygous recessive, and you have homozygous dominant. So when you mix these two, what is the genotype of their offspring going to be? So fill it out for me. See if you can fill it out.
Give me the job. I don't know.
You got it.
Well, did I put the letters?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Genotype is genetic code. It's the letters.
Did I put two?
Mm-hmm. Remember, because it's an allele from your dad and an allele from your mom. Look, big B.
A little bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be two big B's because dominant goes first. So.
All right. And then these two, an allele here and an allele here. What does it make up?
So that'd be big B.
Mm-hmm.
Little B.
Yep. Same thing. An allele from your mom and an allele from your dad makes up what genotype? Good. Same thing. Okay. So looking at this, what is the probability of their kids having brown eyes? What are all of these genotypes? What's this genotype?
That's heterozygous.
Right, heterozygous, and it's big B, little b, right? What's this genotype?
Heterozygous.
Yep, big B, little b.
Heterozygous.
Big B, little b,
And heterozygous.
and big B, little b. Okay? So if they all have big B's, what do they all have?
Brown eyes.
Brown eyes. So the probability of them having brown eyes, remember, each of these squares, how many are there?
Well, 4 squares.
4 squares, right?
Yeah.
Each square equals 25%.
Oh.
Okay? Because you have to equal 100%, right?
That'd be 100.
Okay? Right, exactly. It would be 100%.
I don't know why I put that.
Okay? What is the probability of them having blue eyes?
100? Oh, no, actually, no.
Do any of them have blue eyes?
No.
No. So what's the probability?
0.
0%. You can also write probability in fraction form. You can either write it in percentage form or fraction form. So if they asked you to write it as a ratio in fraction form, how many squares have
4.
what? How many squares have brown eyes?
Oh.
Yep, so you'd write 4 over 4. That's your probability, okay? You can write it 2 ways, okay? And then what will be the probability of the blue eyes?
0.
0 over
0. Oh, 4.
4, right? Which is equal to 0%, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay? All right.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, so now the parents are saying a heterozygous male. So we're going to put the dad on top. So if he's heterozygous male and he has brown eyes, big B here, what goes here? Exactly, because he's heterozygous. He's a mix, right?
Yep.
And he is crossed with a blue-eyed female. So what would her genotype be if she has blue eyes? Look here.
Recessive.
Right. And how do you, she would have to be what? In order to have the recessive trait show up,
Homozygous.
homozygous.
Recessive.
Right. So what is her genotype?
Techno guru.
Exactly. Okay. Now let's find out what their kids will have. One allele from the dad, one allele from the mom. What's the genotype gonna be? Yep. And then one allele from the mom, one allele from the dad.
Maybe 2 small b's.
Homozygous recessive, right? Same thing here.
Oh,
Oh,
B,
no.
little b.
Yep. You just mixed them up. It's fine. Exactly. And then what would this one be?
Big B, little b.
Yep. Oh, no. Look.
Oh, little b, little b.
Yes. Okay. So let's look at this. Will they have brown eyes? What's the phenotype of this? Brown eyes or blue eyes?
Brown.
Brown. Phenotype? Phenotype?
Blue.
Phenotype.
Blue.
Exactly. Okay. So what is the probability then of the kids having brown eyes?
20, 50%.
50%, right? Because half of them, right? Or how many out of, how would you write that as a fraction? How many squares?
4. Oh, yeah.
Yep, have brown eyes on top. How many of them have brown eyes on top? That's how many total there are,
Oh, yeah, sure.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right.
The total goes on the bottom of your fraction. Yep. And how many have brown eyes? That's the number that goes on top.
2.
Yep.
Did I count that or no?
No. You're only counting what's on the their offspring is on the inside. The parents are always on the outside. Okay? And then what's the probability of them having blue eyes? The phenotype. 75% means there's 3 squares. Are there?
Oh.
Remember, blue eyes is recessive, right?
To be 100% then, since there's 4 squares.
And look, how many do you have for brown eyes? Right, 50%. How many have blue eyes? 2.
So it's 50%.
Right. And it's the same exact fraction, right? Okay? Because 50 plus 50 equals what?
100.
100. Okay? Does that make sense? We getting it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So now we're talking about horns. Again,
Jesus.
alleles can be any number of the alphabet. Okay? So they're picking N right now. So no horns is a dominant trait. So that'll be a big N. Okay? Has horns, all right? If they have horns, it's a recessive. Okay? It's little n. So if you have a heterozygous male, which means what? Heterozygous means, right? But it'll be N, right? Okay? Put it up top. Put his genotype up top. Yep. Nope.
A little N.
Little n, yes.
I'm trying to make it a little smaller like that.
Okay? Crossed with a homozygous dominant female. So what is her genotype going to be? It's homozygous and it's dominant.
Oh,
These
yeah,
ends.
N,
Yeah.
yeah. N.
Okay? Exactly. Good. Okay? So the homozygous dominant female, what's her phenotype? If she has two big N's, what is her phenotype?
Dominant.
Phenotype is physical description,
Oh, that's right.
right? Phenotype, physical. Physical description is what? No. Look, Bobby, what's the physical description right there? No horns.
Yeah.
Okay, that's her physical description, is the female. The heterozygous male, what is his phenotype? What is his physical description? Huh?
Has horns.
Has horns has to be what?
He says. Sub B. Homozygous.
What is his genotype first? What do we write down?
Sub B.
Big N,
Little
little n, right? So if he has a big N, dominant alleles always cancel out recessive, right? So what is his phenotype then?
Heterozygous.
So his phenotype is a physical description, which is what?
No horns.
No horns.
Oh,
Okay? So does anybody have the phenotype of the parents with horns? No. Okay? All right, let's see if their offspring will have horns or no horns too. Okay? So let's fill in the Punnett square. Remember, you got to have two, one from mom, one from dad. Yep. Okay, so then one from mom, one from dad. Good. Hold on, look. One from mom,
Okay,
one
try,
from dad. Always look. One from the mom, one from the dad. One from the, look, Bobby.
Fine.
One from the mom,
Oh,
one from the
I accidentally
dad.
put that again, my bad. I put the wrong thing on accident.
Okay? And then one from the mom, one from the dad. Okay. So now, looking at this, the genotypes are what?
Dominant.
Big N, right? Dominant, homozygous. Big N, little n, which is
Heterozygous.
heterozygous. Big N,
Homozygous.
dominant, right? Homozygous, dominant. And then big N, little n.
Recessive.
No,
Heterozygous.
heterozygous. It's a mix, okay? So, what is the probability that all of their offsprings have no horns?
You won't count that one, would you? Since it's just
Big N is dominant. Dominant always cancels out a recessive trait, right? Hold on. Do all of them have big N's, Bobby?
Yeah, I was putting 50 cents.
Right.
50%.
Do all of them have big N's?
No, not all of them.
Which one doesn't have a big N?
This one.
Do they have a big N? Remember, you have to have one from the mom, one from the dad in your genotypes. Do they all have a big N? Yes. Which means all of them are going to be what then?
Dominant.
Dominant, because, which means they'll have what for their phenotype?
No horns.
No horns. Because remember, even if it's heterozygous, the dominant trait always cancels out the recessive trait. In order for them to have horns, what would their genotype have to be? Recessive homozygous, which means what would their genotype be? In order for them to have horns, it has to be recessive. It has to be. So what would their genotype be? What would they have to get from their mom? A big N or a little n?
The one,
And what would they have to get from their dad?
the big one. Oh, nothing, because his dads don't have no.
They'd have to get the
No,
little
no,
n,
yeah.
right? This would have to be the genotype for any of their offspring to have horns. So do any of them have that? No. So what is the probability of them having no horns? 100%. Written as a fraction. How many of them have no horns? Yep, 4 of them out of 4. Exactly. And what is the probability of them having horns?
None.
Right, which is
Zero.
0%. And then written as a fraction, 0, yep, over 4.
Oh, 4.
Right? Okay, good. Exactly.
Oh, my
Okay.
heart hurts. How many ones of these we got? Jesus.
Well, there's actually quite a few, but okay.